let's look at some of the content of what the medium-term expenditure framework is going to look like. We're looking at oil benchmark price of $75 per barrel, chosen for 2013 and 2015. Right now, we're looking at oil at over $100 per barrel, $110 per barrel.
Yes, yesterday closed at about 109.
How do you think, well, that figure looks quite good for us to be able to achieve a result. But when you look at the fact that when we export crude oil and we have to import refined oil, the gap that we think we're saving, wouldn't that be channeled to importation of oil? Do you think that's something for us to celebrate and say, okay, benchmark oil for 2013, between 2013 and 2015 is $75 per barrel? Is this something for us to be happy about?
Well, if you look at what the federal government has in that medium-term expenditure profile, beyond the benchmark price of $75, there's also estimate of oil production, 2.53 million barrels per day in 2013, 2.61 million barrels per day in 2014, and 2.65 million barrels per day in 2015. That also is predicated on the fact that, look, there's some level of relative stability in the Niger Delta. The PIB will be passed into law. More investment will go into exploration and production of oil. So we should have higher level of oil production. But in terms of the benchmark of $75, the basic thing is what they say, that they've looked at the 10-year moving average of the price of oil, and they came to a conclusion that $75 should be averagely below the market for the next 3 years. I mean, the market price. So
many factors drive the price of crude oil in the international market,
absolutely,
which we have to take cognizance of. The challenges in Iran, the nuclear issue, we saw what happened in Egypt and Libya, and we saw the direction that the crude oil took. So apart from the fact that we may have to project and say, okay, relatively we can achieve and work with that figure, we need to also put into factor external issues that may not really, be able to, we may not be able to control.
Okay, I will take it from two sides. Let's look at the benchmark. The beauty of that $75 per barrel is that if any excess is earned at any point in time, it goes into excess crude account or sovereign wealth fund. Under the sovereign wealth fund, you have three fund segments, one of which is the stabilization fund. The stabilization fund will be used in periods when oil prices drop below the benchmark of $75 to smoothen the revenue distributed to the states and to the three arms of government. So with what would have been saved under the sovereign wealth fund stabilization fund segment, the federation should be able to still have a stable level of income even in periods where you have a sharp drop in oil prices. That's one. But then the outlook, the global economic outlook, actually for me indicates that oil price will remain above $75 for the next 3 years. And let's take
that is for us to export it.
Yeah.
What about importing refined oil?
When
doesn't that change that in between what we have right now and our benchmark?
You see, one of the things I would say,
channel towards that.
Yeah, one of the things I would say is that if you look at the fiscal framework for the next 3 years, there's also a provision for subsidy for the 3 years, for a subsidy for the 3 years, which also implies that, look, although at a reducing level, which implies that the federal government may not have any intention to completely eliminate subsidy for the next 3 years. So if that's the case, it simply means that even when oil prices move up, the federation will have to take the hit.
Actually, according to a report that I have before me, it says the government, as a president, actually promised to streamline the management of subsidy.
Yes.
In the light of the huge amount paid
and
this year.
I think they've done a good job there. So far, they've paid about $259 billion. Compared to what they paid last year. Last year, the space was more than $2 trillion. Okay? And this year, so far, as at September 4th, amount so far paid was about $259 billion, which shows a lot of streamlining. And government actually expect that amount will taper down towards 2015. But having said that, there are also several works, ongoing projects that the federal government has, about 3 or 4 greenfield refineries on the pipeline, which is expected to come on stream by 2015.
Refineries?
Yes. There's supposed to be a refinery in Lagos, one in Bayelsa, one in Kogi State.
Okay, new refineries.
New refineries,
What about
greenfield
what about
refineries.
the ones that we've had for years?
You see, the ones we had
Has
for
it been
years,
abandoned?
the ones we have for years, the government has been battling, to put them in workable conditions. But that has not been achieved. A lot of factors have to come into play. Some of those refineries were built more than 30 years ago. They will not be efficient units of product refining.
In other words,
products.
are you saying they're not capable of meeting our
Yeah,
needs?
for me, if you look at the amount has been invested in the turnaround maintenance of these refineries, it would have made sense if those amounts were set aside and used for a greenfield refinery.
Do you think that if we're not able to turn around our refineries, we'll be able to build a new one, build new ones, and yet make them work and produce oil?
The challenge
and refine
is
oil.
not building new one. The challenge is that the fiscal framework for the downstream oil sector makes it uneconomical for refineries to spring up in Nigeria. Because the price is capped, it is not subject to market forces, and anybody who's building a refinery will pray to God that he remains friendly with the government, so the government will continue to buy your products. Because you can't sell the products at their refined cost you can't put the product at the refined cost to the market, because that market price is above the pump price that is legislated by the federal government. So, and that is actually why refineries are now coming up. If we actually take the courage to liberalize the downstream sector to the point that market forces determine the price of refined products, private sector operators will actually set up the refineries. But we have to also recognize the fact that it looks like it is the general feeling of most of Nigerians so far, based on information available at their disposal, that Nigeria should continue to subsidize petroleum products. I was reading the papers today, and the head of service of the Federation said that Nigeria needs 1.89 trillion to actually stabilize power supply. 1.89 trillion naira is less than about 2.6 trillion or 2.3 trillion that was frittered away last year in payment of subsidy. So it simply means that the income that we threw away in a single year would have been enough to stabilize power for the next 10, 15 years. But that is the choice of Nigerians, which the government still has the duty to actually prevail on Nigerians, present the facts to them so that they will make a choice and say, look, do we want to continue with fuel subsidy at the expense of the slower growth in infrastructure base?